Hello, and welcome back to Chasing Masculinity. Today, I am joined by Dr. Anthony Bradley, who is the author of Heroic Fraternities, and we discuss everything about the fraternal organization and brotherhood and community and mentorship and how that is so crucial to the modern man and masculinity. So please join me in today's conversation. It is a great one. Dr. Anthony Bradley, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you've spent a lot of time studying men and institutions and culture. What is the core problem that you are seeing today?
Lots of core problems, I guess. When it comes to some of the issues in the lives of young men and boys, in particular, I'd say age range, I'd say sort of middle school to their mid 30s. One of the things that we're seeing nationally is a purpose void. And this is not new. This sort of tracks historically with economic changes. So whenever there's a massive change of the economy, men have to readjust their identity in terms of what their purpose is and how they participate in the economy. And so right now, we're in a situation where society no longer needs men's physical strength. In fact, the sorts of things that we needed men for in the past, protecting people from enemies, right? Providing from the earth, things like that. Because of the innovation and automation of technology and things like that, you don't really need a man's physical strength. We've advanced enough. Now we have tools. We have machines. And now we're in an economy that's based on data. I mean, that's really the currency in the economy right now. And so men are trying to figure out where do I fit in? Why am I here? What's the point of that? And, it sort of goes all the way back to, I'd say more recently, the sort of big major shift was when the Industrial Revolution was emerging. That was the most recent time where men had to renegotiate their purpose. Before that, we lived nationally, internationally, particularly in the West, we lived mostly on a subsistence culture, mostly agricultural. Families were defined by particular disciplines, like if your dad was a cobbler, then you were probably going to be a cobbler, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your dad was a blacksmith, if your grandfather was a blacksmith, if someone's going to be a blacksmith, then you're going to be a blacksmith, right? So the Industrial Revolution introduced these options. You could work for a factory. Well, it also changed the way that men negotiated marriage and family, because now they're away from their families all the time, and they're trying to figure out exactly like, where do I fit in this new economy? So we had a crisis of masculinity that emerged in the late 19th century, and we saw it primarily in the operation and the expression of church life. For example, by the time we got to 1899, men were gone from churches, and so about 75% of church membership was women. About 90% of church attendance was women. The men were gone. The response to that crisis in the late 19th century was to introduce some institutions to get boys and men back, to give them a sense of purpose. One of those was the Young Men's Christian Association, which we now know as the YMCA. The other was the Boy Scouts. So scouting was to grab boys. The YMCA was to grab men. We got to grab them because they're lost. A major crisis. It also introduced camping ministry. It reintroduced it actually introduced the proliferation of sports as well, trying to get men back in sport. And it's odd for me to say this, but then we got the world wars, and that gave men a sense of purpose. World War I gave men a sense of purpose. It faded, which gave us the Roaring Twenties. Men were lost again. And then World War II showed up, gave men a sense of purpose again. After that, the Cold War started. Men are back from the war. America's number one. Men had a sense of purpose. The wealthiest part of our nation's history. Factories are being built. The suburbs are growing. Men had a purpose, right? We fast forward to 2026. If you were to ask me today, like I said earlier, what in the economy or the culture is men's strength needed? I can't identify anything that's directly needed. And so if you were to ask an average high school or college guy, like, what do you want to do as an adult for a vocation? They're like, I don't know. There's no clarity on that. There's no mission. There's no vision. There's no purpose. There's like, I am here to do X or Y, and I'm committed to that. And so that purpose void has really introduced another category called resignation. And what's happened now, I got this from a psychiatrist named Karen Orney. Last name is spelled horny, but it's German. And so it's actually Horney is how you pronounce that. Good German pronunciation. And what she argues is that a lot of men, when they're lost, they just resign. And what's happened now is that resignation, the tagline is just leave me alone. I don't want to be bothered. I don't want demands made on me. I don't want to have to be responsible to anyone. And the internet allows you to resign. You can just sit on YouTube and watch shorts forever.
Yeah.
You can watch YouTube videos, as I've done, for hours without realizing it. You can play video games for hours without realizing how much time you spent there. So the internet provides a place for guys to resign, and so that purpose void has introduced some resignation, and I think that's really the major crisis we see in the lives of boys and men today.
Wow. So do you think that what is it? The majority of college students switch majors sometime, if not multiple times, throughout their academic career. Is a part of that a failure of knowing what your path is before you go in? Is it part of it? Is that a failure of there isn't enough guidance to even know which direction you could be going in before you go in? How much does that play a factor in that?
That's a great question. I think part of the issue there is that we frame the future for men with a really stupid question. And that stupid question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? That's an idiotic question, right? That's a new question. We have options now that we didn't used to have, so now you get to choose, right? If 1726, you didn't get to choose. 1826, you didn't choose. In 1926, you really didn't get to choose. In 2026, you get to choose. And so that's a dumb question, because the question that really matters, that really taps into purpose and identity and meaning, better questions include two versions of this. Number one, what problems do you want to solve in the world? Right? If there's a purpose void, purpose is often driven by being interested in doing something because you see that there's a problem over there and you want to help fix it. So the question I ask young men now is, what do you want to go fix? Like, what kind of problems do you want to solve in the world? And then that determines your major. That determines your aspirations, because now you have a purpose, which is to address problem A, B, or C. Another question I think that could really tap into this purpose void is like, what do you want to build? Like, what do you want to build? I mean, men were made to be builders. We build things. That's what we do. If you put a bunch of blocks in front of a 3-year-old boy, he's going to build something with it, right? Legos, we build things. Play-Doh, we build things. And if a man doesn't have a sense of attempting to solve a problem, wanting to solve a problem, or wanting to build something, he's not going to know what major to study in college. And so because the question is posed in a way that is entirely unhelpful in this economy right now. People don't know what to do. And that, sort of saying, well, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer, an accountant, to me, doesn't really inspire a sense of purpose and meaning and identity. But if you're like, you know what, I see that in the marketplace that people don't know how to budget well. I want to build an app to help people budget, meaning, purpose, identity, problem solving, building something, right? I want to build a business to make X or Y more efficient. I want to build a machine that makes X or Y more efficient. I want to do something to make other people's lives better because I see a problem over here and over there. And I think if we were to ask men what problems in the world they want to help solve, or ask them what they want to build, I think that you'd have less fluidity in the sort of majors that guys choose to do in college. You also would get more fluidity in making decisions whether they should go to college or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If there's a problem that you see in your neighborhood where everybody's driveway is all cracked and deteriorating, well, that's an opportunity if you're an 18-year-old entrepreneur to open up a small business where you're just doing driveway repair or landscaping or something like that. You might even need to go to college, right? Or if you want to work in trades. I mean, by definition, trade work is problem solving. That's what trades do. They solve problems, right? If our plumbing never went out, you wouldn't need a plumber, right? If cars didn't break down, you wouldn't need a mechanic, right? If new homes weren't being built and you needed someone to wire the electric, you wouldn't need electricians, right? So by definition, those sorts of vocations in the trades are problem-solving vocations. People I know that want to be cops, they're solving problems. People that want to be firefighters, EMS, solving problems. So I think if we were able to cultivate a sense of interest in building things that solve problems, I think we would really tap into the purpose void issue, and we have a lot less of it.
One of the problems that I always see is if you say, because I think, especially since the age of media, since the 2000s, when everyone has a smartphone, everyone has social media, and everyone can see everything around the whole world, is now we're just bombarded with everything, and there's these terrible events happening overseas that affect our, things just are going to affect our mental health when you see these terrible things happening. And it's all the time. Every day there's dozens of events that we would have never normally ever heard of. And so it starts to affect us, and then we feel like the whole world is on fire all the time, and it's always like we can solve it. We need to be the ones to do something, especially being, America. This is our opportunity to fix the world. And I feel like it can give people the deer in headlights. Do you think saying what's a problem in the world that you want to help solve, is that too much weight, or is there a way to distill that into an actionable plan that somebody can walk forward with?
Absolutely. I mean, you can reduce the question and make it as local as possible, right? Depending on where you live. What's a problem in your state? What's a problem in your county? If you live in a big city, what's a problem in your city? Right? There are all sorts of, there are just an endless amount of opportunities to address the brokenness of systems and cultures and people wherever you are. I mean, things are messed up in lots of places, and there is some decision paralysis, like you mentioned, but here's the opportunity. You don't have to fix the world. We just need a band of brothers who are all working like ants, doing their little thing locally. And what happens is it's the collective action of all of us doing things in our particular communities that actually makes a difference, right? Now, let's say that you do have big visions. You do want to, sort of solve for water issues in West Africa. Go for it, right? Get some angel investors, do a pitch, build a business, and you can do big things over there. But you don't have to. There's enough stuff in your zip code that you can find that you can step into. And here's the thing, it doesn't have to be grandiose and big. It really can be something as simple as I'm driving around my neighbor in my community and I see that people's driveways are cracked, right? Or you're driving around in your state and you're looking around and you're like, wait a minute, I see that lots of people haven't figured out how to paint their houses properly. I mean, there's just lots of opportunities if you are looking for them. And I think maybe what would be a good idea, just throw this out, is to maybe get off your phone so you can see what's around you that needs to be fixed, that needs to be addressed, that needs to be repaired, right? And I think there's a lot of missed opportunities there because we're so busy looking at all the issues in the world, being bombarded with those things, that we miss the stuff right in front of us where there's real needs in the marketplace, real needs in communities in terms of nonprofit stuff. And we miss opportunities to take advantage of those because we're driving and looking at our phone, right? Instead of driving around, walking around, getting on a bike around, looking for those opportunities that opportunities to see something that may need to be addressed, right? You're in your state and you're like, politics here is really crazy. I need to run for my county commission, right? Or I need to run for state office. I'm 32 years old. I see these are problems. I believe I could have a voice in making my state better. I'm going to run for office, right? There's a 14-year-old kid right now who's running for the governor of, I think, New Hampshire. And I think it's great because he sees problems in his state and he's like, I want to help fix them. He's doing this at 14. And I'm like, listen, if a 14-year-old kid can look at his state and say, I'm going to put my hat in the ring, then you can certainly do that at 20 or 25 or 35. Right. So you're exactly right. I think the inundation of information and issues can really put people in a position to say, well, it's too big, it's too much, I can't do anything. So I'm just going to stay at home, play video games, and smoke some weed, and DoorDash some food over here, and maybe hook up with a girl every now and then. Right? That's resignation. Too big, too overwhelming. I'm going to just resign and check out because I don't really know what to do. And I'm like, no, actually, just walk around, drive around in your local community and see what's going on in your zip code.
So obviously, paying attention, putting the phone down, looking up, and taking in the information around you would be the first step, maybe in recognizing the needs in maybe not the world, but your world. Mm-hmm. Are there any other advice, or are there next steps after that for somebody who, let's say, they are the ambitious type, they are the ones that see this happening around them, and they do want to do something, they just don't know what. They have the desire, they just don't have the means yet.
That's a great question. So the best thing to do in that sense, let's say there's some industry, there's some topic, there's some issue that you're exploring, is to find a man that's twice your age who's actually in there already and ask him about it. Ask him about the issues, the opportunities, and get some guidance and direction. One of the problems in terms of young men making these sorts of decisions is that they're trying to do it by themselves. And what's true about every young man is that every young man needs a mentor or a coach. Period. Facts. Everybody needs a guide to help them make these decisions. And I think part of the problem is that so many young men are trying to make these choices and decisions without good information because they're not talking to anyone who's already doing that. Right? So you have to take a little bit of initiative and schedule some meetings with people, coffee, drinks, a 30-minute informational interview to say, hey, I'm interested in this industry. I'm interested in this topic, this issue. What do you think the needs are? What's missing? And how do you think a guy like me at my age, at 25, 28 or whatever, can step into the space and address some of those issues? Now, the reason why this is important is that the process of doing that is going to reveal the things that you may be interested in addressing. It's the process of getting the right information. So if you can't talk to someone in person, read a book about it. If you can't read a book about it, we'll go to YouTube and find some stories about it. Right? There is an abundance of opportunities to learn about the thing that you want to do, but you can't really know which direction to move in without some information. And so having a coach, having a guide, having a mentor is going to make this process much more streamlined. And here's the thing, you don't need to tell the guy he's your mentor. You don't need to tell him that he's your director. You don't need to tell him that at all. Just trick him. Just say, "Hey, can I get a meeting? Can we do lunch?" And just pummel the guy with questions. And then when that's over, say, "Hey, can we meet in a month?" Right? And just keep at it. You're being mentored by the guy, but he doesn't know it, which is good because there's some older guys, when you use that word, "Hey, will you mentor me?" they freeze because they're like, "I don't know how to do that." And what it is just hanging out conversations, and you're just asking questions and you're getting recommendations about what to do. Now, this goes for lots of things. It goes for career issues. It could be like personal health issues, diet, exercise, dating, marriage, home ownership, how to mow your lawn, what kind of grass seeds should you get, where should you put these bushes versus the others. There are lots of opportunities and reasons to schedule those sorts of meetings. And I think the isolation is creating this absence of having a clear sense of purpose because guys just aren't engaging with the people that are already in that space.
I think there's something deeply desirable about wanting to do it yourself. It's something about maybe the stoicism built into men where we want to just do it ourselves, hunker down, because then the success, if we're successful, is this, hey, I did it myself. Everyone's like, where did this come from? And you get all these, it's this grandiose thing. And if you fail, not a big deal. Not too many people know about it. And you see all these YouTube 18-year-old millionaires, right, flaunting it, that they did it themselves. And it's this big, cool, successful thing. But then you listen to the greats, you read the books, you listen to the Warren Buffetts, anybody, they'll tell you it's all about who you know and learning from people. I mean, that's why Warren Buffett spends, 4 hours a day reading? It's all about gathering in the information from the people who've done it before you or have been in adjacent fields or who are just wise in general and trying to distill as much of that as you can. And that's, I love the idea of mentorship, of brotherhood, of being a mentor too, because you can learn from both sides of that equation. And it's just something that you have to, it doesn't always feel natural. It feels very unnatural to have to reach out and say, hey, can I look at you? Or can I watch you? Can I just ask you these questions for a one-time half-hour meeting? And it feels very, you have to put yourself out there. It's going to take some guts, and it takes practice, and it never feels 100%, but learning from those people is such a huge benefit. I mean, if you want to be successful, why would you set yourself up for failure if you have competition who's going to do it all by themselves anyway? Why not set yourself apart and be the guy to go out and learn from the people?
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. There has never been a man in the history of the world who's accomplished great things by himself, ever. Right? Even Jesus had 12 disciples with him. You know what I'm saying? So like this idea, this sort of rugged individualism, the kind of Superman syndrome that I need to do this by myself is a fiction, number one. And then secondly, impossible, right? Even criminals don't do this stuff by themselves. Any major drug dealer doesn't become a successful drug dealer without some people around him or her. You know what I'm saying? So it's an opportunity, I think, to do it well. And it's like low barrier of entry. You're just scheduling a meeting to ask a guy about his story. And I can tell you something about most people. They love talking about themselves, right? And so you're just asking questions. How did you get into this industry? What do you like about it? How are you balancing marriage and kids with this? What are some new opportunities that you think the industry should be moving in the future? Is it about to collapse? What are some of the competition issues? I mean, there's just lots of questions that you can ask someone, and that 30 minutes will go by like that. I mean, it's going to be like a snap, and you're at minute 25, and you've only got through 3 questions. You got 10 questions, right? But this idea that you need to be able to do it by yourself and on your own is just absolute rubbish. None of the tech guys who develop the things that we use every day did it by themselves. That's why that's why in the industry you have angel investors, right? So you have a business idea, and then you get some millionaires on board to give you some capital, but they're just not writing you checks and giving you money. You're also getting coached by them. Okay. And here's the thing about the 18, 19-year-old guy on Instagram who's flexing like he did it by himself. He didn't. His dad gave him the startup cash. He's living in his parents' house. He's making all these connections with people in the industry, but he flexes on Instagram in his story as he puts his face in a bowl of ice water at 5:37 a.m. and makes his fancy coffee at 6:13 and journals for 7 minutes and then does a workout and then does a get ready with me thing where you watch the guy put on his socks. I still cannot believe we watch people get dressed, which is just kind of insane to me. But what you don't see are all the guys who were coaching him on how to do that, on how to do the business, how to do profit and loss statements, right? He's getting help, but you just can't see it. And so to take the pressure off of this idea that you have to do this on your own, I think people just need a realistic view of history. I think one of the best ways to get a sense of this is to read biographies. If you read biographies of men, of great men, you'll get a better picture of the network of people that made them successful. I was recently watching one of the tennis tournaments, and Carlos, I can't remember his last name now, the guy from Spain who just won, I guess he won the U.S. Open. At the end, this is so incredible. At the end of the match, there's like the coach's box. So here's this 20-something-year-old tennis player who just won a major. And after the major, he runs over to the coaches. There's like 5 or 6 guys in the box, right? So he's one of the best tennis players in the world, but he's got at least 5 men investing in him to make him successful. That's how success happens. Now, we don't see that stuff every day. We don't see what they do when they're training. We don't see what they're doing, when he's getting his PT. We don't see any of that stuff. But it takes a team of people to make a great man. Now, I'll say this as the last point here on this one. Initially, historically, that first team would have been your family, right? So there was a time where we lived in intergenerational local communities. And so it would have been your dad and your uncles and your older cousins and your grandparents who would have been that team for you, right? You would have gone to your granddad to ask those questions, or your uncle to ask those questions, or something like that. We don't live like that anymore. And so you have to find people to really fulfill some of those roles so that you can get the kind of support that you need to succeed. The other reason you want a team of people like that is to help you properly understand what failure means and how to get through it and how to not internalize it, right? I remember very, very vividly when I was transitioning from a job, and I was moving institutions, and it was a terrible end. And I remember I went to this one church, and I needed prayer, and this old man. I mean, this guy was like Moses. He was so old. I was sort of telling him what the issues were, and he just said this one line to me, and my anxiety just evaporated. He said, "This is nothing but a test. You'll be fine." And he framed it for me in a way that made it okay. I think what a lot of men fear, of course, is failure. And so what you need is a voice to properly frame that so that it's not a big deal. Anyone who's an entrepreneur is going to fail multiple times. If you start a business, you're probably going to fail at a couple of them before you find the one that works. It's a normal part of the process. It's not a big deal. It happens. If you ask a girl out, you might get rejected. If you ask enough of them out, you're going to get rejected. The more you get rejected, the less of a big deal it is. You just move on to the next one, right? Eventually, someone's going to say yes. But if you don't actually take the risk, then you'll never have the opportunity for success. And the risk aversion issue right now, I think, is really, really massive. Guys don't want to take any risk because they're just so afraid of failure. But that's where the sage comes in and tells you you'll be fine. It's not a big deal. Get back on the horse and let's go.
Because you and I have both kind of popped around the country. I think that's kind of just that's the modern way of living now. Like you said, people used to live in communities and you used to have multi generations that you could go to for immediate advice. Well, this is what's helped me. This is what's, not worked. And now I live hours away from parents. My father-in-law and mother-in-law are different ends of the country. Everyone's spread out. My closest sibling is 7 hours away. So all over the country, that's how a lot of people live. A lot of people, especially that I talk to in Colorado, where I'm at now, they're from all over. Everyone's a transplant. Everybody is from different parts of the country, and that's where their family is. So they don't have anybody. And you mentioned that's why you need this sort of mentor counsel that you can go to get this sort of advice, and how beneficial that is, especially now that we're living in a generation that does not have that generational counsel that they can go to. Do you think church would be another great place for men? Do you think the lack of men going to church, or just the lack of Christianity, let's say, or churchgoers in Western culture in America, is also another reason that we just don't have this sort of culture of counsel that we can go to?
Yes, I think one of the issues is that there's not a lot of places where men have space for real connection, an opportunity to meet people who are ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
And a church is a really natural environment where you have that, right? If you're 28 years old, if you're in a healthy church, there's some guys who are twice your age, maybe three times your age, that are at your disposal. And what's really fascinating, I was just speaking at a church in Lexington, Kentucky about this. There's all these retired guys who no one asks, no one taps their wisdom. And they're sitting around like, we don't know what to do. And I'm like, if you're 30 years old and there's a 70-year-old guy in your church, hang out with that man, right? He's been there and done that 7 times over on a whole lot of things. And that's like free wisdom. And he's not going to say no. He's got nothing else to do. If he's a golfer, go play golf, right? So I think church is a place where those sorts of connections would really be natural, and those sorts of spaces where men had those opportunities for connection and networking, you want to use that word, have really evaporated. It used to be like the Kiwanis Club, right? The Elk Society, uh, pickup basketball, the softball league, the bowling league, right? The bar, the dinner club. If you're wealthy, the country club. But so many of those spaces have evaporated for all sorts of reasons. And so guys just don't have a place to connect. And church is a great opportunity to make those connections with people who might be a future guide, mentor, coach, or someone who's been there and done the thing that you're thinking about doing, and ask around for that, and look for opportunities to make those connections. So this one particular church is thinking of, is sort of reimagining how they do their whole culture at church so that it's intergenerational. So it's not just like the young adults hanging around with the young adults all the time, but you have young adults hanging around middle-aged people and also hanging around senior citizens. So that sort of shared wisdom, which is bidirectional, you're helping them, but they're also helping you, is a part of making up for the lack of natural familial connections that we would have had if we lived locally. So we're talking in one sense about surrogate uncles and surrogate fathers and surrogate grandfathers. This is one of the great advantages that churches have that other institutions don't. At the gym, you can't do that anymore because there's music playing. Guys got their earpods in, right? They maybe have a hoodie on. They're like, "Don't talk to me," right? So that's really not a place to do that anymore. But those sorts of opportunities have really waned. But church is an absolutely fantastic opportunity to meet people, to make those connections and get some wisdom.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the different places that you can go to as a men's specific group. And besides getting plugged into any moderately sized church, a men's group at a church is a place where you can have that. And I was thinking, where else does that exist? Like it existed 100 years ago, 50 years ago, even. The men only fraternal organizations that used to be able to cultivate that sort of mentor mentee role naturally have kind of vanished. I know that there's the Elks Club, but I'm thinking country clubs are pretty much all men and women. It's not a place, and is it mostly men? I'm sure most of them are, but there's certainly a large percentage of women. And you go to gyms now, and most public gyms are at least 50% female. And like you said, it's just no longer a tight knit place where you can get to know somebody unless you're at a very small private gym. It's just these places are few and far between now. There is no more cigar lounge. There is no more, the men's club in town or whatever it is, where Friday nights the guys would probably get away from their families, but there would be a group of guys and only guys there through the ages, or at least with some range of age.
Absolutely. We had those until I'd say those began to disintegrate in the 70s, 1970s. By the 1980s, they were all basically gone. And that really happened for two reasons. One is that a lot of them were, and this is bad. I mean, I can say this because it is somewhat negative, but some of them discriminated by race, right? So they wouldn't let certain groups in. So if it was an organization of a bunch of waspy sort of New Englanders, they wouldn't let Polish people in. They wouldn't let Polish immigrants in. They wouldn't let Irish immigrants in. They wouldn't let African Americans in, right? So that was part of the culture. The other reason that they kind of disintegrated is that it became illegal to have an organization that was gender based. And so the introduction of gender equity and the Equal Opportunity Commission, they basically forced these institutions to go co-ed. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of the end of those. And there was nothing else created that provided that naturally. And so unless men did it privately on their own, there just wasn't an opportunity for them to join something that was existing. And I think this is why some men really sort of gravitate towards certain vocations, because it's a fraternity, right? Being a cop is a fraternity. Being a firefighter is a fraternity, right? Working in a union job as an electrician, a plumber, a welder, that's a fraternity. And so what happened is that some of those fraternal organizations became professional organizations. And then that also wasn't allowed to be, men only. And what's really interesting about our country right now is that because there's a bit of bias against men's morality, there's this idea that if you put a bunch of men together in a room, bad things will happen, right? Because we believe that men are more evil than women. So we have no issue with all women's things, right? There's all women's gyms right now. There's all women's social clubs. There's all women's nonprofits that do service things. We have no issue with that. But as soon as we say we're going to do a kind of a men's only thing, like, whoa, well, hold on. Well, if it's men's only, then people are going to get hurt, right? So there is this unfair bias against men's disposition, where the assumption will be that if you put all men together in an organization or a room or something like that, it's gonna go south really bad. But here's what's interesting is that you get the best men when they come out of those organizations, right? Like the best men were formed in a tribe, sort of a men's only opportunity where they had to work together to help each other and cultivate each other to do great things. You think about it in terms of the kind of rite of passage that we have sort of historically in every culture on the planet Earth. You sort of identify, you sort of take the men away from comfort, right? You remove them from comfort, you train them, you test them, you help them figure out and discover what they're good at, what their gifts are. You help them find kind of some new discoveries about themselves. They find out what the kind of contributions they can make. And then you send them back into the community to add value to it. That's what the rite of passage is, right? Removal, training, reintegration. And there's just not an opportunity right now for that rite of passage to happen. So guys are basically lost because those really happen more concretely, more effectively in men's only communities.
So the loss of these communities has been a net negative on masculinity and the world, right? I mean, if you, not to discredit, the females, right? But like up until very recently, for many reasons, like when a group of men got together, they built a bridge. they like you said, they built things, and so the loss of that has been a net negative, I feel like, to what could have been. And you're saying there's not another thing that can replace that, besides church groups, maybe some very select communities, and then I'm also thinking college fraternities would be the only other one that still allows you to be gender specific. Although I know a lot of the major largest fraternities, nationwide fraternities, have been playing with the idea. It's always been shot down of opening it up to co-ed. I'm sure that will come down the pipeline in the next couple decades, but there's those conversations have already begun, and I can't think of any other, besides what we've talked about, any other area where it truly is men's only, and that cultivates that environment still.
Yeah, there's a verse in Proverbs that will be familiar to some people. That says, "As iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another." And I guess the question is, where is that place where your average 25-year-old guy is going to get sharpened by other guys? Where is that place, right? And here's the thing, and this is back to your point about being a bit assertive and entrepreneurial. If it doesn't exist, build it yourself, right? You don't have to sit around and whine about, oh, there's no, right? Get some guys together and do it yourself. And so I've been a part of lots of communities of men who've just decided that we're just going to do this ourselves, and we're going to bring new guys in every year or so, but we're going to get together and we're going to do this ourselves. The institution doesn't exist. It doesn't exist locally. It doesn't exist nationally. But if you have an apartment, if you have a basement, you can do it yourself, right? Now, what's really interesting, there was this was covered in GQ magazine probably 10, 12 years ago. In New York City, it was just simply I can't remember the proper name of it. I think it was something called men's club or just men's group, where 20 something guys, which literally just go to random people's apartments and have a men's club. And they would just get together once a week just to talk and hang out and laugh together and cry together and share stories together. But a whole separate nonprofit had to be invented just for 20 something year old guys to do that. And a bunch of 20-year-old guys just acted on it. They just built that. Right. And what's really fascinating about it is there's a waiting list for it. You can't get in because they don't have enough guys who are willing to host it. You have more guys who want it than you have guys who are willing to host it in their apartments. So this is like super low hanging fruit, guys. I mean, you don't have to. This doesn't require a lot of ingenuity. Guys are really simple. Just get us together with some food, and we'll just figure everything out. Yeah, right. Those conversations will happen naturally if you just get us together around some food and just let conversations emerge as they do. And eventually guys are going to start asking each other questions. Hey man, what do you think about this? This girl said this. Should I do this job I'm thinking about? The questions are going to emerge like that. And then you have that level of iron sharpening just through friendships and relationships. And you can't do this effectively on your phone. You can't do this over a Zoom call with your best buddies all over the country. That's not where it happens. It actually happens live in person, where you can look somebody in the eye, shake their hand, pat them on the back, experience their real-time emotions in person, right? And this is the great need, I think, right now that's affecting, I think, the purpose void and so many guys being lost.
Yeah, women are so good at getting one-on-one and just talking and needing no other reason, no other medium to be doing something besides just maybe they get coffee, maybe they don't, but they just can talk. It's probably a lot harder. I find it very hard. All the guys I talk to find it very hard. You couldn't just say, let's go sit down on a park bench for 3 hours and talk. But you do something, or you get a few guys together, you get a collective, and you bond over doing a thing like, hey, you want to come work out with me? And is it going to be a deep intellectual 3-hour conversation? No, but you have these back and forths like, hey, this happened to me. Hey, this is going on in my life. And it starts to cultivate. Or you get a group of 6-8 guys together and you just sit around and you play poker for a couple hours. And that's what I used to do with all my buddies. And then all of a sudden, someone would say something about, oh, like you said, this girl's said this to me. And then all of a sudden, the guys come together, and it's so easy to bond or to have this medium that you're operating through to meet and do something together. Poker, it could be a group of guys hanging out around a fire, could be working out at the gym, whatever it is, playing basketball together, some sort of medium where you're together and there's an excuse to be together. And then all of a sudden that just seems to open the door to these conversations where you can start to rely on each other and open up. But then also, well, I opened up about you about this. We talked about it. I'm going to try doing this thing. Now, crap, you have to hold me accountable, right? Now all of a sudden there's this follow-up too. And it opens the door to so many great things downstream.
Yeah, I would say two things there. Number one, men connect by doing things together. That's just a fact, right? The idea, and this is why so many opportunities that are created right now don't work, right? The idea that you're going to get a bunch of guys together to sit in a circle just to talk once a week is just stupid. That's not what guys do. They'll do that after they know each other for a while, but guys have to do something first together. So, great illustration of how this actually works, right? Pick up basketball. Bunch of guys get together, play basketball, and then after the game, you know what they do? They sit around and talk. That's where the connection happens, right? You ask your friends to come over to help you re-landscape your yard, Yeah, you do that together, and then afterwards you sit around and eat and have a beer and talk, right? So men connect by doing something first together because that's how they build trust. Men build trust after a shared activity. That's how they know they can trust a guy because they're watching him to see if he's willing to be a bit selfless, right? If he's actually in it just for himself. Because if you're working with a guy and he's a narcissist, I can't trust him, right? But if you're working with a guy and he's actually willing to give up himself to the accomplishment of the goal, then you have this bond that happened first, and then the intimacy and the depth follows there. And I see this so many with like churches and all these different ministries sometimes, and some of the opportunities that are been created, they're really designed for women's temperaments and the way women connect. And I'm like, yeah, you need to have the guys physically do something together first. This is what we do as boys, right? Boys do things. You become best friends with the kids in your neighborhood because you did something together first, right? You burnt something down. You sort of built some ramps for your bikes. You're walking in the woods. You're catching rabbits and squirrels. You're doing something together. For there got to be some shared activity, and the friendship is born out of that. And what we need to do more of is, just like you said, create more opportunities to build connection through activity. And if there's activity, then the conversations afterwards will be natural if there's some intentionality behind it. You can just do the activity and go home, but if it's sort of scheduled in, planned in, we're going to do the thing and then hang out and talk, then that's a very natural segue for those conversations to happen, and they will happen, right? Because you're going to have questions about things and want to get perspective. But once you do things together, that really opens the door for that level of connection that allows for opportunities for shared reflection and things like that. And you use the word accountable. I would say that's true, but it's also an opportunity for encouragement. I think one of the things that men don't get enough of is having men encourage them. If you look at the etymology of the word encourage, it literally means to put courage into someone. You're encouraging them.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
And so guys need other guys to push them beyond their comfort zone. Right? It's not simply being corrected, but actually being encouraged to do something that they wouldn't normally do or wouldn't normally pursue, right? Just a real quick example of this. The data is really sad on this. They're like, right now, what the data shows is that 48% of young men between the age of 15 and 24 have never approached a woman, like, ever, right? Well, I think some guys need some other guys to push them to do it, right? You actually go out to a store, a bar, or something like that, and say, okay, in the next 30 minutes, go get 2 phone numbers.
Yeah, your gaming buddies and your buddies on Discord aren't going to be able to push you like
No.
that.
No, they're not. It's got to be live in an act. It's got to be live action, right? Go get 2 phone numbers and come back. If you get rejected, we'll be here for you, but you got to go. You got to go at least try, right? So part of the what's needed, and I talk about this in the fraternity book, is that every guy needs a tribe. Like, every guy needs a community of men that he knows has his back, who are going to support him, encourage him, push him, listen to him, guide him. It's a safe place for him to fail, to be completely transparent and vulnerable. Like, every single man needs a tribe. You need a tribe of guys who can do that, make those inputs into you in various different ways. Every man also needs at least 1 or 2 guys that knows his weaknesses. And I mean the dark, ugly stuff, the Achilles heel, the stuff that that will take you out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You need at least one or two guys that knows all the dark stuff. Right? Whenever I'm watching the news and I see a 45, 50-year-old guy who loses it all, cheats on his wife, embezzles money, like loses the whole thing, I'm like, he didn't have any friends. That's what that means. Because if you have guys in your life who know the places where you're most likely to get taken out, they can interrogate you on that. They can investigate. They'd ask you, "Hey, how's this thing going? How are you handling this? How's this working out for you?" Right? You've got a context for doing that. And so those sorts of relationships, I think, are really, really important, and guys need to actually seek those out. And they're not going to happen on Discord. They're not going to happen. They're actually not going to happen while you're playing video games together and you're talking remotely to someone 7,000 miles away. It's not going to happen. It actually happens in person, in community. That's where the iron sharpening actually occurs.
I'm glad you brought up your book. I know it's been a couple years since you've written it now, but I came across it. I love the idea of it. Can you talk about what heroic fraternities are, or what led up to this book happening, I suppose, in the first place?
Yeah, so the title is Heroic Fraternities. The subtitle is How College Men Can Save Universities and America, or American University. I can't remember how the order is now. Yeah, it came out a couple of years ago. It came out in 2023, and I was teaching a class on the history of masculinity in America. And as a part of the course, we did a segment on the history of fraternities. And as I read the history of fraternities, I noticed that the history of fraternities, I was in a fraternity at Clemson, go Tigers, had to drop that in. I was in a fraternity, I was in Alpha Phi Alpha Incorporated at Clemson, and my fraternity experience and Greek life at Clemson is not what I noticed in the book, on the book of the history of fraternities. I'm like, what is going on? So that was one thing I was trying to figure out. And then secondly, as I was investigating it, I noticed that at least once a week, a fraternity somewhere in America gets suspended. And I was trying to figure out, like, what is going on? Why are they getting kicked off of campuses every single week? It died during COVID, of course. But then as soon as COVID ended, the suspensions came back. Right. And I said, well, something's going on. I really want to figure this out. And that's when I really started to investigate the mismatch between the history of what fraternities were supposed to do and how guys on college campuses are living those things out. And what I noticed is that the purpose of fraternities is to do exactly what we've been talking about this entire episode. It was a place for brotherhood. It was a place for networking. It was a place for discovering your strengths. It was a place for vulnerability. It was a place for deep connection and friendship. It was a place for professional development. In the beginning, fraternities were places where you had to know how to sing. They would sing together. Mm-hmm. They would read classic works of literature together. They would practice debating together. So rhetoric was a huge part of fraternity life. They would also, have fun together, right? Also help people kind of get ready for the marketplace. They would do all of those things together. In the beginning, the libraries and fraternity houses on college campuses were better than the libraries on the college campuses, right? They were better than the university libraries. And so those were those sort of cultivation opportunities like we've been talking about. And then it went south as fraternities began to wane in terms of their own interests. Historically, the world wars sort of changed some of the waning there. The 1960s, fraternities were seen as sort of a part of the man and the institution. They were too old school, so there was a bit of a rejection of them. And so fraternities began to wane, in terms of their interests. And then in the 1970s, there was a movie called Animal House. It was in 1978, a movie called Animal House. And that movie single-handedly resurrected fraternity life in America. Now, what happened, unfortunately, is that Gen Xers watched that in middle school and high school. And then they said, okay, when I go to college, I want to do that movie. And that's when fraternity life, as we see it today, got so bad because it's all modeled off of that stupid movie, right? And so every fraternity movie since Animal House, every stupid Zac Efron movie about Greek life is sort of modeled off of that. And so one of the things that I do nationally is I travel to different college campuses and speak to different fraternities to try to call them back to their original mission and their original vision. And they were all formative. I mean, all of the vision statements and the principles and all these fraternities were really designed to make good men great men, not for themselves and their careers, but so they could add value to the marketplace and to the local communities. And that was the commitment. So all I'm doing is calling them back to the original imagination for what these institutions are supposed to be about in the first place. And to do that by saying, hey guys, you're great guys. The numbers on where you're going to end up are really, really fantastic. You can be great men right now and provide some formation direction in terms of how you spend your college years and beyond by investing in each other. So one of the key clear definitions that I use for the book that I get from a book by Jeffrey Hammer called Man Up is to define masculinity this way. Right? Masculinity is using your strengths, your power, your creativity, everything about you for the benefit of other people. It's not narcissistic. It's not me-centered. It's not about yourself, but you're using everything about you for the benefit of others. And so I am committed to helping fraternities use their masculinity while they are college students for the benefit of their brothers, like we've been talking about, but also to the benefit of the other men and women on their campuses, right? That your fraternity can add value to your college campus right now, and that you men have all the resources and the capacities and the creativity and the wherewithal and the confidence to do just that. So it's an invitation to re-engage the purpose of these institutions in the first place.
So was the book written as a proof of concept about what fraternities can be, or is it an applicable guide that, let's say, anybody who's in a fraternity right now or is in a mentorship role aiding a fraternity could read and immediately use?
It's both and. So part of it is sort of framing what fraternities have always been about. And then secondly, some best practices in terms of what makes fraternities great. So the book is in two parts. It's a little bit of history in terms of what fraternities were like. It's an honest assessment of where young men are today in terms of their mental health issues, being lost, a lot of fatherlessness, victims of divorce, just a lot of brokenness. We're to talk about those sort of things. And then what the best fraternities do. And then the second part of the book are examples of fraternities who are trying to figure this out. The good, bad, and the ugly. Fraternities that are doing it great and some that are struggling to sort of see what this looks like on paper. And I can tell you this because I've done this on multiple campuses across the country. I get this repeatedly because this is what I do with the lads. I say, listen, I want you to be great men, and I believe that your default setting as a college man is greatness, and that you have everything at your disposal to be a man that adds value to your brothers in this fraternity, but also adds value to your classmates on your campus, to the professors, and to the administration. You are men that have capacity to do great things right now. And here's the comment that I get repeatedly across the country: no one talks to us like this. I'll get comments like this: thank you for caring about us. I'll get comments like this: no one believes in us. Right? And so, what I've learned is that if you don't call men to greatness, they won't be great. If you invite men to mediocrity, they'll be mediocre. Inviting men to just be less bad is stupid because there's no aspiration, right? And so most colleges, and I would say part of our discussion about masculinity in the country is like, just don't be bad. Don't be quote unquote toxic. Right? But no one ever tells men what to do. No one ever tells young men how to add value. But embedded in the fraternity itself is a short list of what that looks like. I mean, even the Boy Scouts, right? Scouting itself, by definition, invites young men to greatness. I'm an Eagle Scout, and for Tuesday night every week for 6 years, I said the following: on my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. And then we recited the Scout law, which included things like this: a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. That's aspirational. That is not don't be bad. And so guys are trying to figure out how to add value, and the culture gives them some stupid metrics. You measure your masculinity by how many women you can get, or how successful you are in business, or how successful you are on the athletic field, or how much weight you can bench, or how many reps of 225 can you do, or how much are you squatting, right? And so what fraternities do is this provides a much deeper, much richer imagination for what it means to be a man, because it's formed in a very positive framework, right? So they all have virtues like truth and goodness, or a man made for others, like stuff like that. And so if you're in a fraternity and you really embrace your history, you're looking for opportunities to be the kind of man that your fraternity wants you to be. And it's really fantastic if it's applied in ways that are consistent with a history, instead of being applied in ways that you see in these stupid movies like Animal House. It's dumb. An absolute waste.
I grew up watching Blue Mountain State, BMS, and that was not around a fraternity or a football team, but that's what I thought fraternities were. That's what everyone I grew up with thought fraternities were, which was just pure drinking, pure parties, 24/7, drugs, girls. Class was barely optional, and that was the fraternity. And very, very few people that I know of went to college for that experience, and the very few that did usually dropped out within a semester or two because they couldn't cut it in college, and that's okay. It's not for everybody. So if you're going to college for that experience, you're not going to make it in college. If you are going to college, you don't really want that experience. So it's this weird dichotomy. And you mentioned something that I love, the idea that the concept of masculinity is, because there were bad men, the bar is just don't be bad. That's what the common preaching is okay, go do whatever, just don't be bad. And if that's it, then doing nothing or doing as little as possible is not being bad. And if you go out and do something great, what happens if that ends up being bad? If you step too far out of your comfort zone, that could be bad. So just don't do that. And doing nothing, barely getting by, that you win in the eyes of society, but it's absolutely killing masculinity and not having that direction other than just don't be the bad guy is, you're right, it's not enough. It's not enough for people without having some sort of, like you mentioned, the core commitments, the core something that they can abide to, some sort of laws or structure that they can read, and this is what they can structure their life to.
Yeah, yeah. They listen. This is kind of what we talked about earlier. They need some direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think this ties back to what we talked about earlier. That's why there's a purpose void, because there's no direction. Because it's formation by negation.
Mm.
Instead of providing some aspirations for men to achieve, right? Some goals. That's why I said, hey, what are you building? What are you aspiring to do to help out people? Like, what are you thinking about in ways of that can add value to someone else's life or to your community? The idea of like just not being bad is one of the reasons guys are sitting around completely lost, because that doesn't give them any insight in terms of what that could possibly look like.
So, if, let's say, on the topic of college fraternities, what would you give as some baseline advice to a current fraternity brother as an undergraduate, or somebody who's working with undergraduate fraternity brothers, to help get back to what you wrote in Heroic Fraternities and what you go around speaking to fraternities about, coming back to the glory days, if you will, of fraternal life?
Yeah, I would say to this is, I mean, it's going to sound like overly simple, but to live out the values that are embedded in the vision and mission of the founders of your fraternity, and to actually look for ways to do that in your house and on the campus. Just do that, right? And one of the things that I tell fraternities is that every single activity or every event that you do should be tied to some very specific part of the fraternity's mission, vision, or values or principles, right? To kind of call them back to stick really closely to some of those really, really clear principles, those 7, 8, 9 values, to have those be a part of the lexicon of how you talk about your fraternity life, how you think about your relationships, the sort of activities that you do together. You want to integrate and embed all of those things in exactly what you're doing on the ground, within real life. What a lot of fraternities do is they learn all this stuff when they're pledging, and once they get initiated, they just walk away from it and start living out the stupid movie scene, right? They just pitch it, and I'm like, no, 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 no. You're not learning all this stuff just to get in. You're learning all this stuff because the fraternity wants this to be a lifestyle for you. So what's it look like to make it a lifestyle? To make the vision and mission of the founders a lifestyle. What's it look like to make their principles in your fraternity a lifestyle? Those virtues that they have, you want to make those a lifestyle, and to encourage each other, to hold each other accountable in your fraternity, to do things a certain way according to that vision and mission, and those principles.
So, last question I have on college fraternities. Let's say I'm an 18-year-old kid. I just graduated high school. I'm going to go to a 4-year university or some sort of college, and I want to get involved with a fraternity or some sort of fraternal organization, something positive, something like I this is what I want, and I want the benefits, and I want the things that you're talking about. And I go to a university and there's 10 fraternities. How do I pick? What do I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always advise guys to find the sort of, during the kind of rush west period, to actually find the community of guys that best vibe with your personality. Ignore the names, ignore the brands, because every campus has a different culture. So one fraternity chap, you could be a Sigma Nu at the University of Texas, and at the University of Vermont, it's a completely different group of guys, right? And so in that sense, what really matters is that you are looking for a group of guys that you get along with, and that you can trust, and guys that are not going to invite you to compromise your own values, right? You don't want guys that are going to compromise your own values. You don't want to be around a group of guys like that. And so you got to visit the houses during rush. You gotta ask questions, right? You got to really interrogate them, because you're interviewing them, right, to see if you're a good fit for that community. I mean, they're also interviewing you, but you really are interviewing them, and that goes for anything, right? I mean, the intramural soccer team or football team or flag football or whatever, like whatever kind of campus organization is there, you need to go ahead and avail yourself to interrogate them to see if, one, it fits your temperament, but then secondly, do they have a value system that's consistent with who you already are, or the kind of person you want to become later on, right? They're all going to tell you that you'll be a better man, by the end of your time at this fraternity than you were when you started. Yeah, I know, but better how? A better drinker, or like a man with better character, right? Like you don't have to settle for something that that's going to compromise your morals just because you want to get in. Right? So I'll give you a great example of this. I mean, I know some guys. It's interesting, right? So Gen Zers aren't drinking as much as previous generations, and so some guys just walk in and say, "Listen, I'm not binge drinking. I'm a dry pledge. So take me or leave me." And the guys usually respect it. I've had guys walk in and say, "Listen, this is what I'm not doing. I'm not hooking up with random girls. I'm not doing drugs, and I'm not binge drinking." And you're like, "Okay, great, come on in." Right? So guys are amenable to people that have convictions, and what they really respect more than anything else is that you are a man who stands on principle, and you have certain convictions. And so I know guys who are very serious Christians, for example, and they join fraternities at party schools, and it's not a ever problem. Right? In fact, one of the trends I've seen is that at these big football schools, the Christians often end up being on leadership really quickly because the guys can trust them, right? Because they're stable, they're not wild, they're not rambunctious, and so you really want to make sure that you have those two things in the front view as you're pursuing opportunities to join an organization like that.
That is incredible advice. That's advice I wish I knew going into college. Thankfully, I was taken into a good organization, but I think a lot of guys find themselves not in that situation. So that's very beneficial to have. I have some rapid fire questions I want
Yeah.
to ask you. And I think these are going to be a great way to end an amazing conversation. So the first one I have for you is, what is one habit that's helped you embrace being a better man?
Wow. I would say reading, for sure. There are just so many guys who don't ever read. And then they wonder why they don't have any insight, any direction. They don't have any content because they don't do any reading. And I would say that that's really something that's helped me be a much better man. And second, kind of a quick two-parter there. The second one is just caring about other people,
Mm.
right? I think you have to get out of yourself. You got to get out of your head, and actually investing in other people is a great way to cultivate your own practice of being a much better person, to actually seek out opportunities to make someone else's life better.
I mean, that makes sense. Those are both things we talked about: is reading and living selflessly. That's
Yeah,
great.
listen. If you have guys listening to this podcast who were in their 20s, right? Especially if they're single, they don't understand the impact they could have at simply mentoring a high school kid, like the Big Brothers program. You literally would change a kid's life by playing pickup basketball with the kid or taking him to lunch once a month. You would change his life, but you will become a better man in the process. So really, really simple things like that.
Yeah, I did have a conversation with a high school kid who someone had reached out because he was going he wanted to go into a similar field, had some questions for me. It was a 30-minute phone call, and I'd ask a question, I'd give him an answer, and he'd just go, wow. I was thinking, man, I really wish I had somebody. I would have, it's amazing because especially as a, between 18 and 22, there's so much that you don't know. And it's usually just you stumble along the way and figure it out. So talking to somebody a year or 2 years older than you, maybe they've already stumbled. It's incredible. All right, next question. What is one cultural lie that men need to just reject?
You suck,
Mm.
right? So I think that so many men believe they need to prove that they don't suck, right? This lie that there's something wrong with you because you're male. It's just an absolute lie. As a man, you are a chief asset that is ready to be unlocked and unleashed to society. That your disposition, because you're a man, is that your net orientation, your existence is value adding. You do not suck. You are not a liability, and you're not a problem to be solved. In fact, your existence means, by definition, that you are part of a solution to something out there that's waiting on you to get involved with it, right? And the world would be a much, much worse place if you did not exist. Like, that's how important you are. And you need to walk around believing that you are a net value add to society, and rebuke the lie, the demonic lie that you suck. Because too many guys believe they suck and they live like that. And they live self destructive, narcissistic, self sabotaging lives because they don't think they're worth much. So they need to prove it somehow. And
Mm-hmm.
that can make you a workaholic, right? Because you got to prove it, right? Oh, I don't suck. Look at how much money I make. Or it can also turn you into a navel gazing, self sabotaging drug addict, right? Oh, yeah, I do suck. Well, I might as well go ahead and do 2 lines of Coke, right? Or I'd say, even lastly here, it could turn you into a gym rat. You're like, oh no, I don't suck. Look at my 6 pack. So I'm gonna roid up to look great because I think I suck, right? But if you believe that you have capacity for greatness, it just changes your entire disposition. And so if you believe that you're a net value add, then yeah, go get the girl's number. Yeah, walk up to her and say hi, get her name, ask her out to dinner, something like that, because you believe that you have something to contribute, you can add value to her life as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. Now, we've talked a bit about formed men and unformed men. What's the thing that separates the unformed and the formed?
Right. I would say that what separates the formed from the unformed is whether or not your masculinity is ordered or disordered. Unformed men are reckless and selfish and self-preserving and self-centered. A formed man is other-centered and he's a giver. He is a builder. He is an investor in other people. One of the ways that I know that a man is mature is that he's thinking about the impact of his own life, not just on his own progress, but in terms of the progress of other people. And formed men really do want to benefit other people, and they think about their existence that way. Unformed men are like 6-year-old boys whose impulsivity is self-centered. They want the ice cream now. They want the tequila shot now. They don't do delayed gratification. They don't do impulse control. They just want to get what they want to feel pleasure right now. But the formed man will practice delayed gratification for the benefit of other people. The formed man will practice self-discipline. He will practice self-sacrifice. And he will also be willing to suffer, not for his own sake, but he will suffer for the benefit of other people. So he will suffer for his wife. He will suffer for his kids. He will suffer for his friends. He will suffer for his community. He'll suffer for his church because he wants them to thrive and to do well. So ordered and disordered masculinity really determines the formed man versus the unformed man.
I love that. I love that. If you want to be masculine or more masculine, delay gratification in every way you can. Love that. All right, last one I have for you. What is the first step towards real brotherhood or building real brotherhood today? We talked a lot about finding a group of brothers. What would be the very first step someone could take?
Yeah, this might sound kind of like overly simplified, but it's fun. It really is fun. Like finding some guys that you can enjoy life together with in person. Like that's really the first step is fun. And there's all sorts of real in the positive psychology community, there's all sorts of great data on the importance of fun. Boys do this naturally. They find guys to have fun with, and then everything else is built out of that. For some reason, grown men forget this. You got to have fun. Fun is one of the most protective interventions for anxiety and depression. It's actually experiencing enjoyment, right? So, and that could be lots of things. I know guys who build computers together. They build robots together. They go hunting together. They go fishing together, right? They got to do something fun together. So if you wanna have this first step in building a tribe of guys, you got to find something fun that allows you to laugh and enjoy each other and enjoy nature and the creation, and everything else will sort of cascade and develop out of that. That's what fraternities do. That's what the YMCA was formed to do. That's what the Boy Scouts was formed to do. Camping ministries that were created in the late 19th century, early 20th century. That's what it was done for. The Kiwanis Club, the bowling league, the softball league. If you look at the sorts of things that built men's culture, fun was always at the core of that. And we want to have these deep intellectual conversations we're sharing, but we want to do it without having fun. I'm like, no, guys, have fun. I'm really saddened by the fact that you often don't see men laughing as they get older. Boys laugh, high school guys laugh together, college guys laugh together. You see guys in their 20s laughing together. But as you see guys in their mid to late 30s, 40s, and 50s, you see a group of guys sitting around, they're not laughing. They've kind of lost the fun part. Like, it's okay to go ahead and play together, and play is important. And you're never too old to play. So, guys, have fun and find some guys to have fun with.
Wow. Dr. Bradley, everybody, This has been an absolute pleasure. This has been incredible. Tell everybody what you have going on. Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, great question. So I'm easily found on Twitter. I do have a Substack that's just called Anthony Bradley. You can find me there. I have a book coming out on fatherhood and father absence, the role of what happens when dads are not in kids' lives. It's going to come out in November. You can pre-order that on Amazon. I am very easily found if you just put my name into Google. So there's lots of opportunities to connect with me there. But I'd say Twitter and Substack, and then the book that's coming out in November would be perfect ways to connect.
Awesome. I will definitely make sure to have some sort of resource in the description of this for your book coming out. I encourage everyone to go check that out and check out your Substack. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. This is fantastic.
Before you go, I want to mention something briefly. If this podcast has been resonating with you, if the conversations around discipline, purpose, identity, and what it means to be a man today have been hitting close to home, then my book, 24 Rules of Masculinity, is officially out. It is a direct, practical guide built around the same principles we talk about here: biblical foundations, hard-earned lessons, and clear direction for men who want to live with intention instead of drifting. This isn't theory. It's meant to be picked up, applied, and just carried with you. So whether you're just starting to take ownership of your life or you're trying to realign and get it back on track, that's why I wrote it. You can find 24 Rules of Masculinity on Amazon or through the link in the description. If you do pick it up, I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.